Welcome to The Business of Family, the podcast where we explore the stories, challenges, and opportunities of family businesses. I'm your host, Tammy Buss, and I'm a family business survivor and also a family business advisor. In this show, we will be talking with family business leaders and experts to bring you insights and inspiration so you too can survive your family business journey. Whether you're a founder, a successor, a professional, or just curious about family businesses, this podcast is for you. So today my guest is Michael Berg, and he's from Michael Jewelry. Now, if you've been listening in the past, you realize that we have a series going on, which is three brothers and a father all in business together. We've interviewed Ryan and Scott, and today we're fortunate enough to have Michael himself here. So welcome, Lee.
Thank you.
So, Lee, we've heard from your two of your sons already, but I want you to really take us back to when you started in 1978. What made you decide to start Michael's Fine Jewelry?
My grandfather had always owned a business and ended up selling it in the 1960s. Owned 120 stores and sold it out to Zales in the 60s. And I had always had a passion for owning my own business. And originally was planning on being in the clothing business, but went to work for Zales in New York. At that time, they owned a bunch of very fine, high-end jewelry stores, and I was in charge of merchandising for Zales. And then I started talking to my grandfather, and in 1977, he agreed to loan me some money to open my own business.
And so in the very early days, what was it like for you? Starting your own business emotionally, financially? How did that feel?
Well, Baton Rouge, Louisiana was where we opened our business. And when we moved here in 78, we didn't know a soul. So we were completely green as to what the city looked like and the state looked like. We borrowed money from my grandfather, my dad, and I accumulated some money and borrowed some money from my brother to start the business. But it was the wild, wild west. That's the best way I can describe it. We were in a strange city. We knew no one. We borrowed a lot of money, and our backs were against the wall.
And at what point did you start thinking of this as a family business, and about bringing your children into the business?
I would say when Ryan was probably 17 or 18, and he showed a lot of interest in the business. And at that point, I decided that it was important to hire a consultant to come in and kind of foster me and foster the family to make sure we made the right decisions.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said your grandfather had started a business and ended up selling it. Did that have really any influence on, the family being able to keep it in the family and transitioning it?
Absolutely. I mean, I was heartbroken when he sold the business, and I wanted my own business and wanted the opportunity to work for myself. I believe that if I control my own destiny, I had a better chance of being successful than someone else controlling it.
So when your grandfather sold the business, was there any discussion with the family about that or not? And is that why you brought in a consultant to help you?
Not at that point. My father, who worked for my grandfather at that point, really didn't have any interest in the business, wasn't passionate about it, and ultimately ended up just selling it. I was probably about 18 or 19 years old when he sold it.
Oh, right. So when you began transitioning this business, and again, you had three boys entering at three different periods, what was the hardest thing about starting that transition or bringing them in?
I don't think that was hard at all. It was just a matter of getting good counsel on the outside, having a good consultant that came in, having family business meetings with the family 3 and 4 times a year to talk about how the business was performing and what it would take for them to come into the business.
And did you bring all the boys in to talk about this, even if they weren't old enough to enter the business? Were they part of these discussions?
I think Chad was 13 at that age when he started coming to the family business meetings and started listening at that point. Mm-hmm. And it really, if the boys didn't want the business, that was okay. If one wanted in and one wanted out, that was okay as well.
Now, how surprised were you when 3 of them came into the business?
I was surprised and very pleased.
And what was it like watching them step into a leadership position and you sort of taking a step back?
First of all, they had to earn that leadership position. It wasn't just given to them. Each of them had to finish school. They had to become a graduate gemologist. They had to work for someone else for 2 years before they came into the business. And then when they came into the business, they came in at the beginning stages. not an ownership position, not a leadership position, just starting in a business.
Hmm. And was that part of the education that you got from the consultant coming in, or was that something you'd learned from your grandfather and your father?
No, I think the consultant taught me a lot of that because basically it's important for the young men that are coming into the business to make sure that they cut their teeth somewhere else.
Hmm.
And I thought that was extremely important. And they got knowledge about the jewelry industry from others as
Hmm.
working for me and learning it.
And what is your role now within the business?
I'm chairman of the board. I'm the founder. And I think my role today is basically just working with my three sons. I'm still included. I don't own any of the business. The three of them, I gave them all of the business about 10
Hmm.
years ago. And they've allowed me to continue to participate. Sometimes they listen to me and sometimes they don't.
As any child with their parent. So when you were doing that transition, if you have each of them has a third of the business, and I know they're co-presidents, how did you start that process? Because they didn't all become owners at the same time, or
Pretty
did
much.
they?
They all became owners at the same time. Yes, they did. My wife and I made sure we got the stock out of our names and gave it to the three of them. And each of them lives in different cities, which makes it easy. I had to make sure that we gave them the area that they oversaw in the business so that they didn't keep running into each other. And each of them has their own little interest that they take care of, which really seems to work out well. Again, hiring consultants to come in and make sure that I did it right.
And so when you divide so how many, so let me just go back and say, how many locations do you currently have?
We have 9 locations in 4 states.
And so when you were dividing the roles and responsibilities, did they participate in this and understand where they were going to take the lead and when they came together?
Some they did and some they didn't. I recognized their strengths and I recognized some of their weaknesses. And I tried to plug them in where I thought they were strong and support them with other people in the company where they were weak.
And did you get any pushback on that at all from them?
Absolutely.
And how did you navigate that? Because that's very difficult because it when you're a family business, it's a lot more complex than if you're working for a different business, that's not a family member. So how did you navigate those complexities?
It's just sitting down and discussing it with them, bringing in consultants, showing them all the operations that need to be overseen, discussing with them where I think their strengths were. Like one lives in San Antonio, one lives in Baton Rouge, one lives in New Orleans. And
Hmm.
one oversees our corporate office, one oversees the watches, one oversees the diamonds, one oversees the rest of the advertising and marketing. So it's all divided up. And I think that each of them have grown into the areas where they're strong.
Hmm. And so is that the same thing then for the next gen coming in? That again, it's the same sort of rules and guidelines and then finding a specialty for them?
I would think that that's going to change. And, it's a lot more complex than it was for me because
Hmm.
now we have three families and trying to figure out how the G3 comes into a business that's doing well and
Hmm.
how they get their wealth out of the business today because most of the wealth that each of them have generated is in the business.
Yes, which is very common with family enterprising families that most of the wealth is in the operating company. And that becomes, again, it's hard enough. There's only 30% transition from Gen 1 to Gen 2. And I think that complexity and how do you maneuver that when you have a child in the business and one not in the business, um, or has the capability or not the capability when you're looking at the largest asset. So when you go to Gen 3, there's like a 3%. So it becomes very complex because if you've got three to divide it between, then you might end up with 6 or 9, which becomes way more complex. So did you ever realize that the business would sort of get to this scale, or you would be going into second gen or into third gen now?
I never envisioned G3. All I worried about was G2. And I made sure that G2 was strong. Each of them is, all three of my sons are extremely capable and have
Hmm.
done an outstanding job. Our business today in the last 10 years has probably tripled in volume.
Hmm.
So, so every year, I mean, I think last year we were up 18%, and every year we have increase over increase. And I think they're doing a marvelous job, but it'll be interesting to see how they transition to G3.
Yeah, yeah. And have you had those discussions with them?
Absolutely. We've already hired a consultant and we're working on that right now as we speak.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Um, So, what is the hardest part, do you find, between having the conversations with your sons or your family with the business, talking about the business, and then keeping the personal and the family side apart? How do you navigate that?
Well, we have two family vacations a year with all 16, with the kids, the grandkids, the wives, everybody. And it brings the family together as a family unit, and it allows them to build relationships outside of the business. Last year we were in Australia. Year before that we were in Turkey and Greece. Year before that we were in South Africa. So we take all 16 of them and try to build a family unit with the 16 family unit, and ultimately it allows them to build relationships outside of the business.
And is there when you're looking about governance and what the kids needed in order to commit to the business, is there structure around having spouses involved in the business or involved in family meetings?
The spouses and the older grandkids come to the family meetings now. The spouses are not involved in the business though.
Is that a structure that was made, like a no spouses allowed within the business, or do they have to apply like anybody else would?
No, the spouses are not working in the business. It's complex enough with three sons. But
Yeah.
bring in one or two spouses and leave one out, it becomes. I've seen other businesses that do that, and it has a tendency to not work out well.
You know what? I agree. I've seen both. I've worked with families that have spouses involved in the business, but unless you have real guidelines around, it's very difficult to allow some in and some not. I've also had it where they've made a decision after spouses were in the business that spouses are no longer allowed in the business, and then had to exit them. So it becomes very complex. And I think, when you're Gen 1 going into Gen 2 is the time to start looking at governance to set up structure so that there isn't a family issue. You don't want a falling out over something, that a decision could have been made earlier on.
And I can tell you that we discussed all of the items that you're talking about loud, like spouses coming into the business. Everything was on the table when we talked,
Mhm.
and we made decisions. All of us in the room made the decision as opposed to me.
Yeah, yeah, and that's really great. So when you look back and having the boys enter the business and then, selling and stepping away, what was the hardest part of that?
Golly, the hardest part for me was probably giving up the buying. I'm still somewhat involved in buying the merchandise because that was the expertise I had with sales.
Hmm.
Uh, I consider myself a merchant among everything else I do, and that's
Hmm.
the hardest part to give up. Uh, Dealing with the customers, waiting on the customers, going to the stores every day, that was easy. Not signing the checks, that was difficult to give up. But
Hmm.
I got a real control and understanding where the money was going. It's very important in a business to watch the money go out as well as watching it come in. So I
Hmm.
think that was probably pretty difficult as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because I've spoken to several families and worked with several families in the retail space, and again, first generation. And one of the issues is letting go of that buying for the store, whatever that product happens to be, because that was how you became successful, one client at a time, by making the right purchases. And as you bring in different generations, there's different areas that they want to go down or different products they want to bring in.
We've been in business now 48 years, and in 48 years, we've never had a sale. So from the standpoint of putting merchandise on sale, and
Hmm.
in our business, it's extremely important to buy correctly because I believe if you buy correctly, you can sell correctly. And
Hmm.
so we go all over the world. I've been going to the Orient for probably over 50 years, going to India. My middle son, Scott, buys all the diamonds in India. So we go directly to the source to buy, to try to eliminate as many middlemen as possible so that we can offer the customer a good value.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, that's great. I love all this information you provided. And I love the fact that you work with an advisor because one of the things that I think is important is bringing in someone with an outside lens that doesn't have an emotional tie to the decisions that are made. And I think that's from my side, that's what I see as the sort of common denominator with families that make it from generation to generation. So I want to just end with three pieces of advice that you would give to other family businesses.
I think bringing in help when you don't have the answers is very important. Make sure you watch your capital and make sure you take care of your people. I believe if you take care of your people will take care of your customers.
That's amazing. I love that. And I got to tell you, I think one of your sons already said that. So obviously, that's a value that's been spread across the generation. So I love that. I love that. But anyway, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to hearing what Chad has to say.
Thanks now.
Thank you so much. If you like this episode, subscribe to the Business of Family podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can also find Blue Roots on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. On the next show, I'll be back with another amazing guest who will inspire you with their family business insights. Until then, take care and keep it in the family. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, tax, investment, or insurance advice. Before acting on any advice, please contact your personal or company advisors.